morning, everyone, and welcome to Dare I Ask, where my goal is to inform, inspire, and encourage. So I welcome you to take what resonates with you, discard what doesn't, and please share what you think will serve others. All right, the question today is, do you ever think about the questions that you ask people? Right? What is the motive behind the question? Do we ever think about that before we ask the question? I would say sometimes, yeah, for sure, right? Like we want to know where they were. We want to know what they're doing. We want to know how much got done. We've got those questions. But what about when we see somebody out on the street? What about when we, when somebody calls us? Right? What about those casual conversations? That's kind of what I'm thinking about right now, because what I'm really realizing and what I'm noticing big time is that casual conversation isn't really happening anymore. And I think a lot of people are noticing this as well. Casual conversation is just, it's becoming zilch. It's just becoming non-existent. So how can we go back, and how can we kind of help to put some spark back into that? Because guys, we need it. That's asking questions is actually the best form of engaging conversation. I'm actually in the middle of reading this book here. I started a long time ago. I've got about 20 books on the go. But the book here is Asking Better Questions. So I started reading this book because, being a homeschooling parent, one of the best ways to teach is not to dump information, like exactly what they do in schools. They dump the information, memorize it, get tested, on to the next thing. There's very little room there. Very little room for critical thinking skills, for them to expand their mind, right? Very little. How do you get them to do that? It's by asking questions. So I started reading this book hoping to get some, ideas, really is what I wanted. I wanted some ideas because for me, you know what? I went through the same school system where basically you're numbed down, you're dumbed down. The passion to learn from the most people is just sucked out of you, right? This is the education system, unfortunately. And you ask 9 out of 10 teachers out there, they'll say the same thing. They will completely openly admit this. So I thought, and because I didn't have the knowledge on how to do this, I thought, okay, this book will help. And by the way, who's this by? Nora Morgan. But as I was going through this book, reading it, and I mean, definitely it offers some great options for good conversation starting questions, right? Which is perfect. But then I came across this question, and I'm always very intrigued with those questions that really spark those introspective kind of angles, right? That's my cup of tea. So I came across this, and this really struck a chord with me. Ask yourself, what do I want this question to do? So what do we want the question to do? Do you know what I'm noticing? I'm noticing that more than half the questions that we ask people, especially in those casual exchanges, right? Family member calls, we bump into the neighbor. They're such shallow questions. What do we want that question to do? I think if we were to be totally honest with ourselves, what we want the question to do is kind of we're just throwing out the line, but we have no intention or no desire to even catch a fish. What we want the question to do is we want that question to make us look like we're actually trying to engage, but we don't want to engage. And how do we do that? We ask really, oh, hey, how's the weather today? Or how was it? How was your tree? Very lame, shallow questions. You know, how you doing? Hey, how was your week? Oh, look at the weather. Yeah. What do you think it's going to be like tomorrow? Yeah, me too. Bye. We're literally we're throwing a line out that we don't want any fish to bite. That's shallow. That's surfacey. That's not being authentic. So when we're asking questions, so this statement here, ask yourself, what do you want this question to do? How can we want to throw out a question and actually want to catch a fish, want to engage? How can we want to ask questions that will create deeper conversations? How do we do that? I think the first place that we have to look is within how connected we want to be, because that's the bottom line. If we don't want to be connected, we are not going to be wanting to catch a fish, right? What we want that question to do is to just kind of play lip service. So I was thinking about it, and if what we put out is what we get back, and if we're finding that we are getting more isolated, more lonely, more depressed as a society, then what I think we want to do is we want to throw out a question that is going to catch a fish, right? It's almost like a double-edged sword, though. You know, I'm speaking mostly from experience here, because we all do surface conversations. We all do this. But are we doing it to our own detriment? Right? So I think we really have to look at the questions that we're asking. And so once we determine what do we want the question to do, well, I think we've got to change our perspective there. What we want the question to do is to catch a fish. Okay, we need to completely change our thing. And we're saying we want to catch a fish. We want to engage, because engaging is the part of life that's the sustenance. That's the meat and the potatoes of the meal of life, is engaging with other people. So how can we learn to train our brain to ask the questions that are going to catch the fish, right? This is what it kind of all boils down to. My thoughts on that are, we need to kind of loosen up. We have to become a little bit more European, right? Because North Americans we don't sit in outside cafes for hours and socialize like the Europeans do. We don't do it. It's not our culture. You know, Western society, for the most part, we're all workaholics. We're all so driven on accomplishment and achievement that we've completely forgotten and disconnected, and we don't even know how now to throw out a question to engage in a good conversation. Like we just don't. So how do we do it? We have to think. We have to kind of think in that more relaxed tone. And it's thinking about connection. So if we were to sit there and think, you know what, if I really, really, just with one person, try this with one person, and then see how it feels. See how it feels inside of you. So if you go up to one person and you're like, hey, how you doing? Oh my gosh, I haven't seen you in so long. What are you up to? And hold that eye contact right there, the answer to that question, what do I want this question to do? By holding the eye contact, asking the question, you're telling yourself and to the person, I want an answer. I want to convey the message that I really care about this person and I care to know what the answer is. They give you the answer. Wow, that's so cool. When did you start that? When did you start that? Hold the eye contact. If you do this one time, and again, you might try it once and that time didn't flop because that person didn't want to engage. That's okay. That's okay. Do it with somebody else. Keep doing it until you find somebody where you do have that connection. And feel what it feels like inside. And know that when you do that with one person, you know it's going to be reciprocated. Somebody is going to do it to you. And this is how we stop the chain. This is how we break the cycle of this superficial, shallow connected life. Right? Let's get back to knowing each other. Let's get back to knowing ourselves. And the other thing, that's actually another thing. The more that you get into deeper conversations with other people, you actually learn a lot more about yourself. You'll all of a sudden something will come flying out of your mouth and you go, oh my gosh, why did I just say that? What was I thinking? And your mind will all of a sudden go racing. Just relax. But if you were to self-analyze afterward and go, why did I say that? Why did I divulge that personal information? Or why did I, it could be anything. Maybe it's because we're craving, without even knowing, we're craving that deep connection. Right? So I will leave you with that. Think about it. Think about the questions that you ask people. And before you do, ask yourself, what do I want these questions to do? What do I want to achieve by asking these questions? And hopefully the answer to that is, I want to create a deeper connection with other people, because that's true food for the soul. So have an amazing day, and I will talk with you tomorrow. Take care.